Today we're going to go into Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, and because it's Father's Day, I'm going to do my best not to be long, because dads, you don't like long messages, and so I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can today. But we're continuing our sermon series in the parables of Jesus. It was so awesome that Pastor Jermel Mayo, that was with us last week, spoke on a parable. He didn't steal my thunder at all, because that was not what I had planned. So it was just awesome that he sort of was a part of this sermon series without him even knowing it, but the Lord knew it, so that was great. I want to talk to you today about building. How many of you guys here, you like to build? Raise your hand. Whatever it is, there's a number of guys in the room. That's not just exclusive to men, but it seems like, generally speaking, men like to put their hands to something and feel that sense of accomplishment when you've built something. My prowess in building coffee tables is well documented here at City Church. I'm not great at it, but I love to do these little projects. In fact, I got my garage all cleaned out this summer. It's all ready for my next project. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to build something. I like to build stuff with my hands. So I want to talk about building, because whether you like to build things out of wood or stone or brick, you're all builders. Whether you're a dad, whether you're a mom, whether you're young or old, every single person in this room is a builder. We're all actively involved in building. Maybe you're building a career. Maybe you're building a marriage. Maybe you're building a family. You're building friendships. But certainly all of us are building lives. We're building our lives. And we don't build it with the hammer and the nails. We don't build it with mortar. But we build it with decisions and choices that we make. We build it with the words that we speak and the actions that we take. And so Jesus, in our parable here in Matthew chapter 7, he's just concluding his Sermon on the Mount. And at the very tail end of the Sermon on the Mount, he shares this parable with his listeners. He says this in verse number 24 of chapter 7. He says, therefore, that's sort of summarizing the whole message so far. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. That's very clear from the parable. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand who the builders are in this parable. You don't have to be a brilliant Bible scholar to understand who the wise and the foolish builders are. They're you and I. It's all of us. It's everyone who has heard the word and the message of Jesus. All of us are either the wise or the foolish builder. The question is not who the builders are, but the question really that Jesus has for us here today is, what manner of builder are you? What manner of builder are you? How are you building? Are you building as a wise man, or are you a fool? Now, do you know the 3 rules of real estate? Anybody ever heard what the 3 rules of real estate are? You have heard. Location, location, location. All the other things, come secondary, but the 3 big ones, and you're looking for real estate to buy a house, is location, location, location. And the fool chose his location to be sand. I said a minute ago that none of us dads here are perfect, and I'm the least of the perfect dads. I remember back when I was a missionary, we were so busy doing ministry. We had teams coming and going. We had evangelistic outreaches into the towns in the interior of the country. I was going into the schools and the universities and building a national youth and young adult program. Just busy, 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 busy. But there was this little thing that we had to do as missionaries called quarterly reports. Now, there's no Assemblies of God missionaries in the room today, I don't believe, but if there were, they would probably cringe when they heard me say that word, quarterly reports. What we had to do is we had to compile all the receipts and we had to make account for them on a quarterly basis. All the money that we spent, every dime, every mile that traveled in our cars. We had to translate all of those receipts. If we lived in a country that didn't speak English, we had to translate our receipts. We had to copy them. It was back in the day before there was electronic mailing, so we had to actually put these in envelopes, and we had to send them off. Every quarter we had to do this. Now, if you know me at all, you know that I am not the guy who thrives in an environment where you cross T's and dot I's. That's just not who I am. I don't get excitement out of, burying my head in the details. I kind of like to fly 30,000 feet above and look at the lay of the land and look and see what's coming down the road. That's sort of how God has made me. But I certainly appreciate those who give attention to the detail, because it's necessary to have that. So I remember as I was getting toward the time when I had to finish my quarterly report, and we were so busy in ministry, and therein lies my excuse. I'd open the door to my office there at the house, and I'd look at my desk, and I'd see a pile of paperwork. And you know what I would do? I'd close the door to my office and walk back into the hallway, because there was more important things to handle in ministry. I'd go back in again a few days later, and I would see the pile had grown a little bigger as I had laid more receipts on the desk, but once again, I would shut the door, I would go back out and do more ministry. Week after week, month after month, pretty soon the quarterly report was well overdue, and now I was pushing into the second quarterly report. Now I'm 6 months behind, and now that desk got even bigger and bigger and bigger with receipts, and now I even less wanted to go into that office and see that room. And every time I did, the pressure and the stress. Has anybody been in this place before? The pressure and the stress just began to compile and compile. Maybe it wasn't a quarterly report for you, but maybe it was your income taxes. Maybe you're juggling bills from one to another to pay this, and you don't pay that for 30 days or 60 days, and you pay this one, and you start playing this juggling game because there's not enough income to cover the bills that you have. And so that was me. And then the email started to come to me saying, get those reports in or your funds are getting cut off. Now I'm losing sleep at night. Now that pressure of that and all the ministry that was happening was becoming overwhelming. Not long after that, I developed stones. I hate that word. Gallbladder stones and kidney stones. You don't want either one of those. But I developed that and had some other sort of health issues that happened along the way. And I believe it's all attributed to the fact that I was putting off the responsibility that I had of doing those quarterly reports. Finally, I got myself into the office, and what should have been an easy job became just a torturous job that I had to spend weeks going through receipts and translating things. So finally, I got caught up. And let me tell you, when I mailed that last quarterly report and got caught up, do you know the weight that just fell off of me? I mean, I felt this huge weight just roll off my shoulders. The stress, the cloud, it was just gone almost immediately. Don't choose the wrong location. The man went and he decided, I'm going to build my house in the sand. Both of these men wanted the same thing. They both wanted to build a good home. They both wanted to provide for their family. They both wanted a place that would last. But the man, the foolish man who chose the sand, looked at the sand and said, you know what? It's going to be much easier to build here. I found that most of the times in my life when I get into the most trouble, it's because I have chosen the easy path rather than the right path. And I was choosing the easy path not to do my responsibility, not to finish those quarterly reports, to put it off. It was so much easier just to put it off. And I think our nature is to choose the easy path. I think that's the default really for all of us. We look at the road and we say, let me choose the easiest road there is, rather than the difficult way. But the easy path is always the path that the crowd travels. And where the crowd travels, it's easy to get lost. Building your house on the sand is a lot easier than building your house on the rock. Building your house on the sand is taking the easy choice to stay in bed, the easy choice to put off till tomorrow, the easy choice, Dad, not to discipline, not to say no, the easy choice to indulge the desire, to spend the money rather than save it, to blow off the appointment. The easy choice is not to think about eternity. The easy choice is to think God understands. The easy choice would be to pursue your own personal happiness at the expense of others. The easy choice would be to think that when you're all alone, no one is watching. This is the easy path. This is the path that the fool takes. Not only is building on the sand an easy thing to do, but building on the sand is also the quickest way to build. Now, I'm like probably most of you, I like a good shortcut. I like what the Lord of the Rings, Pippin, said once. He said this. He said, shortcuts make long delays. I think there's some wisdom there. Shortcuts make long delays. I've taken a few shortcuts in my life. I want to put up a picture that we all recognize behind me. It's a picture of a tower in Italy, the Leaning Tower of Pizza, or Pisa, whatever you prefer. There it is. We've all seen it. We've all seen the pictures. Maybe there's a few that have been there and taken a picture next to it. I doubt anybody wants to live in that tower. But it's an interesting story, this Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was started in 1173 by Bonanno Pisano. There's a name. Bonanno Pisano. He started to build that tower in 1173, and he built the first 3 floors before they all had to stop construction because of war. There was war, there was upheaval in the land, and they couldn't continue this project. It was built as a tower, as a bell tower for a church, a standalone bell tower. But after the 3rd floor was completed, they had to go off into war, and they had to take care of other issues, and it would be 100 years before they would get back to the construction of what would eventually be 8 stories. And when they came back, they noticed that the tower was leaning. They noticed there was a problem. They recognized it 3 stories in. They said, what's going on here with this tower? And so they investigated and discovered the problem with the tower was, as you can imagine, is that they built it on soft soil. They built it on sand and clay. And because of that soft foundation, the tower began to lean. And so you know what they decided to do? To build another floor. That's right. They decided to go ahead and continue with the project. And so they built another floor, a 4th floor. And each floor, if you look really close, you'll notice that they would build the floors with the lean side lower than the high side, thinking that maybe if we just add another floor, it'll balance itself out. So they did that for the 4th floor, the 5th floor, the 6th floor, the 7th floor, the 8th floor. After 200 years of construction, we have this Leaning Tower of Pisa, which really isn't a leaning tower at all, to be honest. It's the falling Tower of Pisa. They started out to build the Tower of Pisa, became the Leaning Tower, which is in reality the falling tower. How this is a symbol of so many lives. Starting out good, starting out with great intentions, wanting to build something beautiful, but starting to build on the wrong foundation. And after a while, it's noticed. After a while, it becomes apparent. In the early stages, you don't see it. But after time, you begin to see that something is wrong. There's cracks in the foundation. You can't just put a little putty in the crack and think it's going to fix it. But the tower begins to lean. And then it begins to fall. What they should have done, after they came back from war and they saw that it was beginning to lean, they should have taken it back down to its foundation and built a new foundation and built it upon something that was solid. This is how the fool builds. Nobody in here wants to be a fool. The foolish way is the easy way. The foolish way is the shortcut. But the wise man in Jesus' parable here chose to build on the rock. We used to sing this song in kids ministry. I'm not going to sing it today like I did a couple of weeks ago, but we used to sing a song about this in kids ministry. The wise man built his house upon a rock. The wise man built his house upon a rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the winds and the rain came down, and the floods rose up, and the house on the rock stood firm. Jesus said, the wise man is the one who hears my words and puts them into action. Dad, I want to say this to you specifically, but to everyone in the room. If you were told that serving Jesus, that living your life in obedience to his word was easy, then you were lied to. And if you weren't intentionally lied to or deceived, the person who told you that is ignorant. Because it is not easy to build your house on the rock. It is not easy to hear the words of the Lord and to do them. It's counterculture. It's against everything that the world tells us we should be doing. Jesus likened serving him to carrying a cross, to denying ourselves, to losing our lives. It's counterculture. It's putting others before yourself. It's loving your enemy. It's giving without the thought of getting in return. It's being honest, even with the price of honesty is costly. Building your house on the rock is not easy. But the price for not building on the rock is so costly. At the end, it's not going to be just a leaning tower, it's going to be a falling tower. And Jesus says here in the very last verse, he says, and it fell with a great crash. John Flowers said something when he was preaching. He said, we're not playing marbles here. We're not talking about playing marbles. We're talking about eternity, eternal issues. As we build our homes, as we build our lives, as we build our careers, as we build our family and our children, what are we building on? Listen, being a dad just isn't about making a baby. Almost anybody can make a baby, guys. That's a piece of cake. But being a dad is about being there every day, every week, every year. Being a dad is about being faithful and being consistent. It's not about the easy way. It's not about the shortcut. The last thing I kind of want to bring out in this is that in both the wise man's house and the fool's house, the same thing happened to him. The storm came, the winds blew, and they beat against the house. The rains came down, the streams rose. Both houses had to deal with hardship. If you've been alive more than a day, you know that life is not easy, is it? But life is filled with pain, it's filled with hardship, it's filled with struggle, it's filled with loss. Jesus said this, in this world you will have trouble. But he said, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. But nevertheless, Jesus promised us that we're going to have trouble in this world. There's going to be storms in your life. There's going to be hardships. There's going to be trials. The test of your building is going to come when the storms come. Will what you have built, will it stand? Not if the storm, but when they come. Will it stand the trials of life? Will it stand loss? Will it stand sickness? Will it stand when you fail? Will it stand when tragedy strikes? Will it stand when temptation comes knocking at the door? Will it stand when your bank account reads zero? Will your faith stand? Will the house that you built stand? Or will it fall? I tell you today that if its foundation is built upon the rock, it will stand. And that rock is Jesus. Specifically in the parable here, Jesus said, therefore anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. Specifically the rock here in his parable is the word. But we know from John's gospel that Jesus is the Word. So we know that the words that are spoken in this Bible are the words of Christ, the words of God, that this is the rock in which we must stand upon. It's all written down for us, guys. If you know how to read, it's right here. It's in the book. You can read it. You can hear it as it's being taught. There's no excuse for us not to know the Word. The question is, are we doers of the Word? The blessing doesn't come from hearing. The blessing comes from doing. James says in his book, don't tell me about your faith, but show it to me. So there's the question. Not do we just hear the Word, but how are we doing and putting it into practice? Most of the mistakes that I've made in life in building is because I have disregarded the instructions. Oh, I could tell you a lot of stories about that. I won't bore you with them. But I could tell you a lot of stories about me when I thought I knew and I started to put something together only to get to the end to find out that I had used the wrong part in the wrong place. You know those stupid IKEA furniture? I don't know how many times I thought I could put together one of those things without the instructions, ended up having to take it all apart again. Or trying to pretend like it's not wrong. Some of you here may be expert builders. You can build sheds, maybe you can build houses. You can build a lot of things. Maybe you've done a lot of building in your life and you say, yeah, Pastor, there's a lot of stuff I don't need to read the instructions. But when it comes to building your life, you need the instructions. When it comes to building your life upon the rock, you have to get into the instructions. There's no other way to build it upon the rock, doing the Word and not just hearing. So our worship team comes back. We're going to go to the Lord's table here in just a second in communion. I think what Jesus is saying to all of us in this parable, again, closing up his Sermon on the Mount, he speaks in this way. I think the question that he's really asking all of the listeners then and now is, how are you building? How am I building? Have we been taking the easy way? Have we been taking too many shortcuts? Are we noticing now that the tower is leaning? If you are, then there's two choices you can make. You can make the choice of the builders of the Tower of Pisa, and you can just keep adding other floors onto it, pretending like everything's okay. You can say, you know what, maybe just let me add this on. Let me just do that. It'll fix itself. It'll level itself. Over time, it'll all be right again. Or you're going to make the choice to say, you know what, I'm going to go back to the foundation. You see, it's never too late to go back to the foundation. It's never too late, as long as we draw back breath, to go back to God and say, God, forgive me, I've been building on my own foundation. I've been taking the easy way. I've been taking the shortcut. I've been building on the sand because all those around me are building on sand. And so I'm just sort of following the crowd. Or maybe my dad built on the sand, and now I'm doing the same thing that he did. You go back to the Lord in repentance, and you say, Father, forgive me. I'm not building properly. I want to build on the rock. And you go back to the book, and you get into the instructions, and you start saying, I'm not going to just be a hearer of the word. I'm going to be a doer of it. And you set that house firm. Dad, don't ever lose sight of the fact that the home and the life and the family that you're building is not just for you, but it's for your kids. It's for your kids. You're teaching your kids how to build. When you blow off church to go to a ball game, you're teaching your kids how to build. When you give to the church, your tithes and your offering, as God tells us to bring into the storehouse, when you do that, guess what you're doing? You're teaching your kids how to build. It's exactly what you're doing. When you're praying and fasting and seeking God for direction in your life, you're teaching your children how to build. When you're just living for yourself and doing whatever you sort of feel like you should do and want to do, you're teaching your children how to build. They're watching you. They may not be taking notes in the car behind you, but the brain is registering. The brain is seeing it. They're listening to the conversation. They're watching the deeds. When you build upon the foundation that is Jesus, you're teaching your children to build on that same foundation. Dads, are you more concerned about leaving a financial legacy for your children than a spiritual one? Are you more important that they know who the starters are for the New York Yankees than for the men that are spoken of in this word? Inspect the foundation. Go into that place in your life. Maybe today, but I pray that something stirs inside of all of us dads today. That you go and you go down to that foundation and you inspect it. What's it built on? Is it cracked? Is it leaning? Is it falling? That we get on our knees before God and we do something about it.